Welcome to season 5, episode 5 of our Campfire Talks, brought to you by the Camp Network team, which is part of Camp Support. We're going to be talking today about the experience of Burning Man from the eyes of young burners and their families. And to get us started and inspired, there was a wonderful short documentary about kids at Burning Man produced by the Burning Man Project in 2016. And we're going to take a brief look. One moment. Here we go.
This is my first burn. This is my second burn.
It's my 5th year going.
I'm Lulu, I'm a burner, and this is my 18th Burning Man.
I'm Malio, and this is my first year at Burning Man.
The first year I went to Burning Man was 1995. I was 6 or 7 years old. I learned to ride my bike here. I actually also learned to drive at Burning Man when I was much older. I had a lot of life's firsts out here in the desert, and a lot of my growing up happened here, even if it was just in that 1 week a year, every year.
What's Burning Man about?
Well, I always was told it's an art festival. I think of it more as like an awesome holiday.
What I think it is it's a gathering of a lot of people.
It's a place where you can go and take a break from the real world and never, don't have to worry about work for a whole week, I think.
In my opinion, it's a chance to have a ton of fun.
A place where lots of people come and build stuff.
This is the only time you can just do what you want to do.
It's like a community with a lot of kids and adults, and my favorite part of Burning Man is seeing all the art.
I like fire.
My favorite is the art cars.
Art cars? Art cars. They're really cool.
The art cars are these cars that are decorated. The craziest thing I've seen at Burning Man yet is the octopus that shoots fire.
It's just like roaming around. It's got like fire. It's really cool.
There's the Burning of the Man on Saturday. A lot of rides and cool structures that you can see. There's a bunch of art exhibits. Some of them you just look at, some of them you can really climb on.
For the kids, it's way out there. Who doesn't want to sail on a pirate ship in the middle of a dust storm?
I have identical twin boys, Aaron and Theo. They're almost 4 years old, and this is their 4th burn, 5th if you count in utero.
Burning Man is a man. And he burns down, and the temple.
I've had a lot of people ask me over the years, what is Burning Man to me, because of the fact that I've been here for so long. It's a very difficult question for me to answer because it is so many things to me at this point. It's all of my friends. It's the greatest party you'll ever go to. It's my favorite neighbors.
I actually learned how to fire dance, and that was really awesome.
At first, it was a way to
All right. I love watching videos about Burning Man. It always makes me so excited for this place that we love. And I'm really excited that we get to talk about this today. We'll be having a moderated discussion around the topic of kids at Burning Man from 3 angles. From the perspective of adults bringing kids, from the perspective of the youth themselves, and how we build a community that includes young people. While we're having our discussion, please keep yourself muted. But as we go, if you have questions that you would like to pose to our panel, please put them in the chat. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. If you would like to participate with camp support, either in a talk like this or as part of our team, please fill out our volunteer form, which will be in the chat. This particular conversation will focus on the broader considerations and impacts of Burning Man on the families and young people who attend. But we will be sharing a bunch of resources, practical tips, and helpful information both throughout and then also at the end. And I want to introduce our topic about Burning Man from the perspective of adults with another short clip from our cool documentary. And then we'll really get into our conversation. So, here we go.
I think that a lot of people have a hard time with the concept of bringing children to Burning Man, and I think that a lot of that stems from either a misconception of what the event is or their own personal interpretation of what the event is.
Telling people that you take your family to Burning Man definitely does get the full spectrum of responses. For people who are critical of it, I simply remind them that in any city of 70-odd thousand people, you're going to have a host of potential experiences, and it's your responsibility as a parent to control which of those experiences your children are actually interacting with and exposed to.
For some people, this is not the place to bring your children. If you are a party person who's going to go out every single night and go dancing and not come home and not take very good care of yourself while you're out here, you should probably not also bring your children here. But if you're a person who wants to involve your children in your life as an adult, and you're a person who supports those children and wants them to experience the things that you experience, then I think it's a great place for kids.
The people who say Burning Man is no place for a kid, I think it is a place for a kid. It is the place for a kid to learn about interaction, to learn about values. Just meeting people, just talking to people. She doesn't care about naked people, or it's all there, but she doesn't care. It's the grown-ups who care. It's the grown-ups who have a problem with it.
They're never unchaperoned. I know that that's no guarantee that they aren't going to witness something kind of provoking or challenging, but at its worst, I figure anything like that is just going to prompt a conversation. And you can't be afraid to have those conversations with your kids.
Well, my mom, in the default world, I don't think she'd walk around without a top. And in the default world, I don't think my dad would walk around in a kilt.
It's only through avoidance, mystifying things and making them other or forbidden by just kind of confronting it head on and not being afraid to address it in the moment.
You know, any criticism of mixing children in with it, I think is true in any large city. And this is a city, there's 50,000 people. You know, there are things that aren't appropriate for kids. I think it's well separated, and I think it's healthier here than back in big cities.
As a child, I didn't experience any drug culture at Burning Man. Nobody ever offered me drugs when I was a kid. I think it's a very responsible community. I was offered drinks at bars in San Francisco before I was 21, before I was ever offered a drink at a bar at Burning Man. There's a culture of responsibility for each other and for ourselves, and that's something that I think really is fantastic for children who grow up here. They're able to take on that responsibility for themselves and also see others at least being conscientious.
In any community, there are children. Burning Man is a city. Cities have children. Children learn from their parents, they learn from the other people around them, the values and the mores of the city, you know, of the community. So they learn how to be the kind of people that we want to be, all of us out here, by being here with us.
We are in Kidsville. There's like trampolines,
the voodoo shooting gallery,
Dodgeball. Pillow fight arena.
Kidsville began as a place for families to come together and share their Burning Man experience together.
Kids can find out about the inner workings of Burning Man. They can go to the airport, they go to the radio station. It's really important for kids to be able to be here at Burning Man.
Anybody who takes kids out there knows that it's a wonderland for kids, and they can take delight and experience wonder in the same way at the same time as the adults and for the same reason. How often do you get to do that? How meaningful is that?
They get to experience adults in a state of play and wonder. In the rest of the world, they don't get to see adults like that very often. It kind of levels the playing field in experience between child and adult in a really beautiful and innocent way.
It really shows them that anything's possible. They can do anything they feel like if they figure out how. It's really a valuable lesson in our society, you know, back in the default world. In so many cases, kids are just watching. and their own making and doing is not necessarily as valued as it should be, whereas out here, every little thing that a person does to contribute adds to the whole and can be valued equally, and the kids are actually doing something.
How could you have a real community without having kids in it? Without having elders in it and kids? You know, how can you have a real community if the elders and the kids aren't talking to one another and the parents in the middle are looking at both of them? That's what family's for.
Children can learn so many things from Burning Man. Just being able to say yes to the unusual and to say yes to the things that the standard cultural norms try to prevent us from doing. Touching the art was an amazing thing for me as a child.
When she was little, they used to have the kids pull the rope to raise the man when he was lying flat on the ground. And it took all the kids to get the man standing up and, you know, some grown-ups on the end pulling too. It was a valuable part of what we did, and they were valued for their contribution. So I think that's one of the most important things about having kids at Burning Man. It's a great leveler for all of us.
All right. I think that really sets the stage for the conversation that we're going to have. So I'd like to introduce our voices for this evening. First up, we have some adults, Marilee and Keith from the Empire of Dirt. Would the two of you share with us a little bit about what is Empire of Dirt? How long have you been burning? And who did you bring to Burning Man?
Sure. So I'll go ahead and start and then tag in Keith. So I'm Marilee. I use she, her pronouns. We are based in Oakland, California. And we've actually been with a number of different camps. We started going to Burning Man in 2003. 2004. Thank you.
Yeah.
Keeping me truthful. And we actually started going with a different what we would now call mutant vehicle support camp called Fast Furnishings. We got involved quickly making cupcake cars and moved on from there to making and helping to build other mutant vehicles. So we are in a camp currently that kind of bridges the space between a mutant vehicle support camp and a theme camp with lots of interactivity. Our current mutant vehicle that's kind of the main focus is Project Empire, which looks like a big sort of bug slash spaceship. And we do kind of performance-based art on that. We also, because when we had our child and needed a way to get around and the cupcakes got to be too small, we built kind of an intermediate, or Keith built kind of an intermediate sized mutant vehicle called the Electric Wrecker, which we still also bring out there. And that's kind of, I fondly think of that as our family vehicle.
Yeah, it's our, exactly.
Yeah, so we are very much in a small work-based camp.
Nice. And you've been bringing your young person from the beginning.
Yes, from the very beginning. So Keith and I went on our own for 2 years, and then the third year we came back, I was pregnant. So that was in 2006. And then our child was born a little later that same year. And so Caritas came to the playa for the first time in 2007 and has been going every year since then. So somewhat upset that the pandemic ruined their perfect record.
Their perfect record.
Yeah, for Burning Man attendance.
Yeah. The record, it ruined everyone's perfect record.
Well, yeah,
So I think we're all on the same page. Yeah. And speaking of young people, we have another person joining us who is a young person who's been to Burning Man as a young person, Julia Wolf. Julia, would you like to introduce yourself, how long you've been going to Burning Man and where you camp?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Julia, or my clan name is Roadrunner. I'm 20 now, and I've been going to Burning Man since 2005. So do the math on that. My first burn, technically 2004, was in utero. My mom was pregnant with me, and my first cognitive burn was 2013 when I was 8, and I've gone pretty much every other year since then. Um, I camp with the Alternative Energy Zone, AEZ, and yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think one of the things that we heard in the documentary clip that we saw was that bringing your kids to Burning Man kind of has some divisiveness in our community. That often there can be criticism about having kids at Burning Man because it's not made for kids, either in the content or in the environment, or that having kids at Burning Man takes away from the adult experience. Um, I know Burning Man can certainly be overwhelming and shocking for adults. So I'm wondering uh, particularly I'm going to start with Marilee and Keith. Um, how did you talk with Caritas about what they were going to see and experience, um, particularly when they were quite young?
So that's an interesting question, and I think Julia may be able to provide some more perspective on this than we would, because Caritas was going from the very beginning. I think 7 or 8 months old the first time that they went. So it wasn't really a matter of telling them what they were going to experience, but I would say that as they got older, kind of reminding them of things that they would be re-experiencing and how those things might be different as they were getting older. So I think I would probably leave it at that. But we were never in a situation where we were, showing pictures online and trying to talk about it. But it's really, even with adults, it's very difficult to explain and to prepare people for what they're going to experience at Burning Man. So I don't think it would necessarily be all that different for kids than for any newcomer.
And I agree that it's probably, I hadn't thought about this, Marilee, but I think it does, maybe it is easier. And I mean, in a sense, Curtis and Zoli and the other kids, that kind of grew up at that time, grew up there, right?
Mhm.
So they don't have, there isn't that shock factor.
Yeah. I think one of Caritas's favorite moments about Burning Man, or at least it used to be, maybe now as a young adult, not so much, but being in line to get in. And, you get out of your car, you start socializing, and people would see this small person and say, "Oh, is it your first time?" And Caritas would say, "No," and then would hold forth on um, just like the world's smallest expert and authority on Burning Man, and, get engaged with people who it was their first time and start to tell them what they were about to experience. So that was always really, really fun to see.
Julia, the first time that you went, when you were cognizant, was when you were 8, I believe. How did your dad prepare you for coming to Burning Man?
Well, okay, I would sort of respond similarly, even though I didn't go right from the beginning. I was still young enough that it wasn't, I honestly don't think it was more shocking than if you go for the first time as an adult, because you don't realize how atypical the stuff at Burning Man is. And so my dad, I went just with my dad for the first several years. He did a really good job preparing me, but not the same thing. It wasn't like this is what naked people are, it was, or not like showing images online. It was just telling stories and like kind of more teaching me about how to have an open mind and that sort of thing. And then when we were there, it was more so, wow, I have a lot of questions, but he answered the questions in like a very matter of fact way rather than making things feel like awkward or uncomfortable, which I think is also something like as a parent that you have to be like able to do and okay to do.
Mhm. So rather than making it a spectacle or sensationalizing the things that you were seeing, really grounding it in the reality of the human experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Marilee, you mentioned that some of those conversations may have changed as Caritas got older. Um, how did you address like sex at Burning Man, drugs, alcohol, like those kinds of things that I think tend to be the moments that either people who are against having kids at Burning Man or people who don't go to Burning Man kind of like clutch their pearls about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that Keith and I are really fortunate in that we not only co-parent with one another, but we also have Caritas has a best friend who also goes to Burning Man, and we have camped with them or camped close enough to them, and the two kids have hung out with each other pretty consistently the entire time that they've been going to Burning Man. So we try to, for the two kids, set a set of common expectations, and it's really been useful to have for veteran burners sort of having a discussion about what kind of rules and boundaries we want to set for the kids, because each year they're a year older. They're not only bringing their own experiences and expectations about what they want to do, but also pushing the limits as kids will do. So we, before we go to Burning Man, the four of us will sit down and have kind of a talk with the kids where we kind of come up with a set of common rules. And it's really about safety not only for themselves but also for other camps. So for example, as they're getting to be older and as they're getting to be sort of young adults, they've telling them that they really need to stay away from bar areas, not just because they could get served or because we think that they might be interested in getting served alcohol, but because they might get that camp in trouble. If they're young people loitering around a bar area, that could be a problem for another camp. So just really making it clear to them, if there's a anything that looks like a bar, you just need to stay out of it. It doesn't matter if you need a drink or whatever, you just need to steer clear of that. And similarly with they've been going to Burning Man their whole lives. They know what's the what, and they know what's kind of the what are the more adult parts of the playa. And I think that honestly they aren't really very interested in going to those areas, and those areas are kind of grouped into neighborhoods. So they're more interested in kind of pushing the limits. How long can we stay away from camp? um what are the rules around being in touch with radios? How often do we have to check in, and that sort of stuff. So Keith, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, of course, it was a good long time. Like, how old do you think it was before the kids could go? Like, how old were they when they could actually go out of our sight with radios?
Oh, probably like 13
Yeah, exactly. So
or
we're not talking
something.
about like sending 8-year olds off with
No.
radios, right? Just to be clear to everybody. Um, I mean, I do think the thing that the thing that always struck me as well is that we also, that we treated this very much, and as Marilee mentioned, kind of like as reality, and as Julia mentioned before, like not there was no sensationalization, right, of things. And so part of it is just like, well, this is part of what adults do when, and um, I mean, I don't know, maybe I don't know if I can assert this or not, but I have the sense that even to this day, those two kids are less likely to like swear and stuff because they like roll their eyes with that, right? When the adults start like pushing being adults, right? The kids are just like, oh, God, what? This is so. Why are you guys doing this? Or right, or witnessing people who have had too much to drink or whatever, right? If anything, it's been and I mean, would you agree with this, Marilee, or do you think I'm exaggerating?
I'm not sure I would entirely agree, but I do
Okay.
think that, yeah, I do think that the kids have definitely seen some pretty extreme adult behavior, and it hasn't necessarily reflected the adults have not wound up being the heroes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Julie, what was your experience of like these more adult aspects of Burning Man, either as a young person starting to go, or how did that change as you got older?
Well, I tend to agree with what you were getting at, Keith. I think that it just wasn't interesting to me. There's so much to do at Burning Man that it didn't matter that there were like a section of it that's more adult focus, not like a geographic section, of course, but it didn't matter that there were things that I couldn't do as a kid because there were just other activities. And like you said, they weren't interesting to me. And I also sort of, you know, as a kid, kind of remember thinking of the adults a little bit as buffoons, like making fools of themselves, being super drunk or whatever. And so it's like I sort of learned to laugh at it and also approach it like now that I'm, more of an adult. I think I approach things from a more responsible place than many of my other friends, or certainly did as a teenager, because of those experiences, having seen that kind of stuff. And yeah, it was always a learning experience and never a problem.
Yeah. Cool. I'm wondering, particularly given Marilee and Keith, that you were on play with an infant or a very young child for a long time when they were a toddler. Um, how do you, or how did you balance the care needs they may have had with your own burn experience?
Yeah, so I'm not particularly a big party person to begin with. I'm a early morning riser. I like to get up and get out of bed a little earlier than, Keith, for example, who will sleep in a little more. So our routine on Playa when Caritas was very small was to actually get up, put the kid in on the bike with me, in whatever safe way we had. We had a bike trailer, we had a baby seat for a while, and then a bike trailer later, and go off and do a morning art tour on the bike and just get out, just the two of us. And then come back to camp for a nap right around the time that the winds picked up. And that is actually really one of my favorite memories from Burning Man, is just like,
I wish I had
having
done that more with you all, actually.
having the energy and the wherewithal to like get out of camp, because a lot of times you can really, especially if you're camping with really awesome people, it can be hard to get yourself out of camp. But get up, have my coffee, or get to center camp back when center camp did coffee, go get coffee, go out, see some art, and then come back to camp. So I think that really doing that. I think also because for my work I have traditionally traveled quite a bit for work. About a week out of every month I would be traveling. So for me, Burning Man is really more about family time than like party time. So I really, I never really felt like I was trying to balance a decision between the type of Burning Man that I might want to have without a child as with a child. And one thing that I do want to say is that I really respect any people, particularly women, who really feel like they don't want to take their kids, that they really need that adult time to themselves. I think that all decisions around bringing or not bringing your children to Burning Man, it's really important to recognize that we have a diversity of needs and approaches and parenting decisions, and that those are all, whatever's right for that family is right for that family. So I'm not here to try to convince anybody who's teetering on the edge of not bringing your kid to Burning Man to do that, but just to give support to everybody wherever they are in their parenting journey.
Yeah, totally. One of the things that I really appreciate about Empire of Dirt is that particularly as the two young people have gotten older, they've become almost fully incorporated into the life of the camp as well. Um, and it sounds as though that was something that you tried to do as early on as possible to really bring them in seamlessly. How did the, because I believe they're the two young people in the camp. Everyone else is adults.
That's actually kind of flipped. So
Mm.
when the kids got into high school, they started bringing their friends with them. So there has been a point where there have been almost more teenagers in camp than anything. But it's because the kids motivated themselves to get there, and did things like save money to buy a ticket and stuff like that. But yeah, I would say that our camp is really, as I said, we're really big on working. The kids were, as young as possible, put to work doing things that were age appropriate, getting ready for camp. So they're all far more comfortable around power tools than I am, for example, because of that. They're very capable young people with a lot of skills and capabilities, and also their own ideas about what they want to do and what they want to execute on. So they're fully, for at least the last 3 or 4 years, they've been fully participating members of camps with their own types of projects. One example I will give, this is going back to our Volkswagen bus camp days, and I see some Volkswagen bus camp people
Yay,
in the
VW bus cap,
audience.
yay.
But Caritas actually set themselves up at the Leopard Lounge, which was kind of there's a bar and then there's a massage area, and Caritas actually got um, a nail painting kit and did leopard nail uh, leopard fingernails for anybody. So would just wander around the massage area and just ask people, do you want leopard nails? So bought, went and took money that they had saved, bought gold and then a little black marker and made these leopard. So it was like, this is my contribution. And that was entirely their idea. That was not anything that any adult came up with. As far as I know, that was kind of their own their own kind of contribution.
And another thing I would add is that because in a way we've been, I mean, our experience has been fairly art car focused, right? Especially at night. Um, there's a way, I mean, the kids have always been involved in that in one way or another, right? So in other words, like with the big projects, the whole camp, like with this thing Empire, right? Like we all have to get ready, we have to dress up, we have to, so the kids are just part of all of that. But even younger, um, again, the kids would get dressed up and they enjoyed that. And we'd take them out and, if they were not enjoying it, we'd bring them back. If they were enjoying it, I mean, I'm reminded of when I was a kid and my parents used to go out to like play bridge with their friends, that kind of thing. And they would end up like tucking me in the bed, like in bed at the friend's house, and then grab me and put me in the car later, when I was asleep. Um, we had we often would have the kids kind of nestled in some quiet corner of the art car, and with ear protection on and whatever, and so there's a way in which you can kind of, I mean, we tried to include them in those activities as much as was possible and was appropriate.
Nice. Nice. How, for the two of you, how has bringing your child to Burning Man impacted you as a family or as a parent?
Yeah, it's well, as a family, it's meant that our kid has missed a week of school for their entire school career, including the first day of kindergarten, the first day of first grade, um, in high school, missing, I don't know, the third or fourth week of school. So it's been really, it's been important enough to us as a family that we've kind of prioritized it and made it part of our kind of annual planning cycle. Although we do always check in and say, is this still something that we want to do? Um, but I think it's made us a lot more resourceful and creative. And I don't know, I feel like getting through the pandemic with the two of them was, I felt relatively easy because we had gone, going through Burning Man preparation and the playa fights, man. That is a thing. If you're in a relationship with anybody, you are going to have a playa fight, and that includes with your kids. You can have like just the worst fights because it brings all of your emotions to the surface, but you learn how to process those together, and you also just have just a bank of incredible shared memories that you're not going to be able to share with anybody else.
Yeah, I mean it's and it inject. I mean, I love that. The ply fight thing wouldn't have occurred to me, but that's absolutely correct. And it's another aspect of sort of getting more reality in your and their lives and contending with it, right? And also having, I mean, there are other things that serve this purpose, but having this shared goal experience, there's this kind of cadence to the year that it brings, right? Um, that is it's a strong shared experience most of the time. I mean, including some of the like difficulties, tensions, working things out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Julie, I want to come to you. How did going to Burning Man impact you when you were younger and while you were growing up?
Well, I was definitely more confident in all aspects of life. I was more able to be self-expressed, like after having seen that at Burning Man, that radical self-expression. And I was more confident interacting with adults and strangers. I was never scared, like never shy or scared of like public presentations or speaking or anything because well, most people at Burning Man are adults, and so most of the people I interacted with for that week were adults, and almost all of those interactions were positive, and adults were, I found, usually super interested in talking to a kid, like always eager to hear what it was like from a young person's perspective. And most kids or many kids are sometimes a little bit apprehensive of talking to adults, and so I think that just certainly contributed to making me a more outgoing person. Um, Also just more comfortable with ideas and expressions that are a bit out of the norm. And I think because I sort of grew up with that, like I didn't have to, I guess, adjust my perceptions. Like when I now, so I'm in college now, and that's obviously a huge shift, like leaving your bubble and your home. And I think I felt more comfortable doing that. Because I guess I was more comfortable being uncomfortable. Um, and yeah, I also just I developed a huge sense of adventure and toughness that I think sticks with me in all aspects of life and has become a huge part of who I am. Like I love, rugged adventures and camping and doing something that you don't know what you're getting yourself into exactly. And I think a lot of that comes from like the Burning Man mentality.
Yeah, definitely. Um, many like Marilyn and Keith alluded to this about like the impact on school. Many young people start the school year in September, either before or right after Burning Man. What was reentry like then for you jumping into school? And how did your default peers view you going to Burning Man?
Yeah, so likewise, I every year that I went had to miss a week of school, which was the same thing. My parents had an expression. They said never let schooling get in the way of your education. which I think is, important to remember. And school is important, obviously, but there's other and different ways to learn and experiences that you'll never get in a classroom. And so my parents just decided that those years it was worth it to miss the week of school. And yeah, I think my peers, honestly, most of them didn't know what Burning Man was the first few times that I went. And then in high school, most people thought it was really cool. I'm not from the Bay Area, so there's a lot fewer people who go to Burning Man, but there's definitely like conceptions of it being a huge rave, and it was a lot of explaining to people what it was, which I enjoy talking about it, and I always found that fun. But I feel like the other thing that about reentry is like as a kid, I don't feel like it's as difficult as an adult because, well, for one thing, I enjoyed school more than I think most adults enjoy their day job. So it wasn't like I was dreading to returning to the real world or the normal world. And also, as a kid, like part of the fun of going to Burning Man is that you get to sort of be a kid again and you get to play on all this art and climb on giant things that you can't do in the real world. It's like an adult-sized playground. But as a kid, you come back and there's still playgrounds and there's still opportunities for play that are built into your life. So I honestly think it's much less of a shift. I remember as a kid just being like finding it funny going back to using money, and definitely it was like a shift. It helped me realize like that not everyone in the default world is as eager to share or interact with strangers or be kind, or like radically inclusive as they are at Burning Man. And it was really special to see that people can be that way.
Yeah. Nice. I love that Burning Man is more normal for kids than it might be for adults. Awesome.
Can I add
Yeah.
something on reentry? So this was my way of handling this, and everybody's going to have their own way of handling this. But because I was acutely aware that I was pulling my kid out for an entire week of school, I just really didn't want them to come back in dusty, ragged, worn out, unable to focus that first day at school. So we always left at the crack of dawn or before the crack of dawn on Sunday. So I haven't seen a temple burn since my kids started school, which is fine. I mean, but so this will be the first year that, because our kid will be starting college, that I won't have that obligation of having to get back for the first day of school. I can do what I want. I could stay until Tuesday. I can go to the hot springs with the Volkswagen bus camp people. But it was just kind of that just not wanting to have Exodus be a thing that delayed us getting home even more, and just having that day to to decompress, sit in the bathtub, and it meant that I was leaving Keith in camp to kind of like pack up after us. So thank you, Keith, for supporting us through that. But that was the way that we approached kind of that re-entry, is kind of giving ourselves a little extra time to get back into school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll say my dad and I did the exact same thing. I've seen one or maybe two temple burns, but we pretty consistently left first thing Sunday morning. Well, and it's a 2-day drive for us, but we just, it was always really helpful to have a little bit of time to shift rather than get home at 11 p.m. and go to school at 8 a.m. the next morning. And my dad spent hours in the car ride with me, like practicing my times tables and stuff like that to sort of, one, like make up for the work that you'd missed a little bit, but two, like slowly reintegrate yourself into a classroom environment.
Yeah. Julia, what was maybe a challenging thing about Burning Man that you experienced as a youth attendee?
I honestly had challenging experiences, or at least very few that are memorable. I never had issues finding things to do or finding people who were welcoming. The main difficulties for me were like just the hardships of typical rugged camping. My dad and I have always camped in a tent. And so we've done it sort of on the cheap, which has worked great for us. But it comes with its own challenges, but those aren't challenges that are specific to being a kid. Um, and also you learn to love those moments, like being out in a dust storm, the kinds of things you look back on nostalgically, right? Um, and then the other thing, it's not like a full challenge, but there were a lot of new things to learn. And I guess we've already talked about this a bit, but just the culture of like sex and drugs and like profanity and all of that was interesting to figure out like how to understand that as a kid, because there was some stuff that I'd heard of and like knew about a little, and it was like, is this something I ask my dad about, or like, but I learned that it's better to just ask. And then he always gave me straightforward, non-stigmatized answers. And yeah, I think there are maybe a few times that I can remember feeling like I was in a place where I shouldn't quite have been, or seeing something that I shouldn't quite have seen. Like especially when you're a teenager, there's very few teenagers who come to Burning Man, is one thing that I've noticed. I remember as a kid, like when I was 10 to 12, that sort of range, there were 8 to 12, I guess, there were tons of other people, or plenty of other people my age. But as a teenager, especially an older teenager, I feel like there were very few people, because that's sort of the age where, one, it becomes harder to miss school, and two, your parents maybe start to think that you'll get a little too involved in like the party scene or the drugs or whatever, because it's easier to do so. And so that was a conversation that I had with or I guess that my dad had with me. But also, like, my parents have a very trusting relationship. I think you have to trust your kids if you're gonna bring them to Burning Man with you. And especially like each year that I got older, it was the same thing. I had more and more privilege. And so the last time that I went, I was a senior in high school, and I could pretty much go wherever. And it was fun. I had my younger sister with me too. She's 3.5 years younger. And so the two of us got to go on adventures a lot. And I remember once we walked into this cool looking temple, and the woman asked us if we'd like to participate in a workshop about better understanding your sex compatibility with your partner. I think she thought we were partners, me and my sister, or something like that. And we just sort of knew enough to just walk out and leave. And that's just how we handled that situation. And it was fine. And then we laughed at it,
Yeah. I remember, so Julia, I've known you since you were quite young, on the playa, and I remember people and camps actually making accommodations for you because you were a young person. Like, the AZ Margarita Bar intentionally making a batch of non-alcoholic margarita mix, like frozen margarita mix, so that you could participate with us and not feel excluded just because you couldn't have alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a huge part of like a lot of camps at Burning Man have an alcohol component, but it's so easy to just include kids in that. It takes such a small amount of work. And I guess this is sort of shifting to the community thing a little bit, but yeah, those sort of moments, like those were the memories as a kid that made me feel involved. And I think also like my parents always approached like parenting both at Burning Man and outside of Burning Man as like teaching, or like treating your kid not in a patronizing way, but as an equal. And I felt very much so treated like that by the people in the AEZ and most adults at Burning Man, which was a hugely like important part, I think, for me as a kid at Burning Man.
Yeah. And Julie, one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you today about this is because when you were younger, you did a TED Talk about your experiences at Burning Man. Um, and so like reflecting on what you viewed about Burning Man as a 9-year-old versus now looking back, um, how has going to Burning Man as a young person shaped who you are as you became an adult?
Right. So my TED Talk was about the 10 principles, and I highlighted a couple of them that at the time were like my favorites. And I talked about how you can apply those lessons and those principles to your everyday life, even if you never get the opportunity to go to Burning Man, which I think is a really valuable lesson. And I still think so. I highlighted, some of the more self-explanatory principles like gifting and leave no trace. And those I still are obviously hugely important, but I think that the principles sorry, that I carry forward in my life now, a lot of them come from Burning Man. Like I said, I have a sense of adventure and also camping in the AEZ, the alternative energy zone. Everything is solar powered or wind powered or hydro powered, no generators. And that experience at Burning Man has helped shape what I want to do in my university degree and my career. I'm studying environmental science and sustainability, in large part because I was so inspired by those experiences at Burning Man. And also, the other thing I'll say is seeing how people can participate and how kind people can be to each other and the way that people work together. Like, that's not, those social dynamics are not something that you usually get to see in the default world where it's a little bit more fun for yourself, um, outside of, people who you're friends or family with. But at Burning Man, strangers would, at least to me as a kid, were incredibly kind. We had people cook me food, or like my favorite thing, the kid with kids get cuts. I never had to stand in any lines, stuff like that. Like people went out of their way to be kind, which was, I try as much as possible to bring that into my everyday life, just like a little bit of pay it forward, right? And I think that seeing that at Burning Man and being able to apply that into your everyday life has really influenced for the better who I am as a person and how I interact with the world.
Nice. Aw, I love hearing that. I'm wondering about now, um, how the community as a whole, and particularly camps, and this is for all three of you, might make themselves a welcoming experience for families or kids. Maybe what was your experience in your camp in trying to create an experience that is welcoming for young people? And or what could other camps that maybe uh, don't have kids but want young participants to feel welcome when they stop by? What would that be like? Maybe we'll start with, do you guys take kids on your art car?
Our so yes, I would say so. So the big art car, yes, definitely. In fact, John, who's usually driving, will stop and invite kids on. He's a big softie for kids, for sure. Um, so having kids on an art car, our art car is maybe only really seats like 3 or 4 people, so it's kind of hard to get um to get kids on there. And also it's very high off the ground, so sometimes I feel like a little like
Yeah,
I don't, yeah,
you have to be careful.
yeah, because we don't want anybody to fall off and get crushed under the giant iron wheel or something. um but I in terms of like the camp, I think, it's really all about dialogue and not making assumptions. So, as a family, if you're looking to join a camp, or, when I was pregnant, having a conversation with my campmates at the time, like, well, I'm pregnant now, but next year there'll be a baby. How do you all feel about that? And that was also a kind of a smaller camp, and getting buy-in and just judging people's comfort. Also, when we joined bus camp, having a conversation with people that we knew there already, and trying to kind of gauge how that was going to work. Bus camp had already had another kid there, so I think that they had, we weren't the first kid in bus camp for sure. In fact, it was one of our preschool classmates who was in bus camp, which is part of how we found out about them, I think. Also, we have a Volkswagen bus, so it's kind of unavoidable. um, um,
Yeah.
uh, Not exactly tent camping, but pretty close. Yeah, so I think it's always all about dialogue and kind of ongoing dialogue, because it's not just about bringing your kid to Burning Man, but bringing your kid to Burning Man at the age that they are, and having that, because I don't want anybody in camp to feel like they need to moderate their behavior because I'm bringing a child into camp. I don't want that to be, uh, that would make me uncomfortable. Like, I'm imposing something on somebody, even if I'm not asking them to moderate their behavior. If they feel like they need to, they're not going to have the burn that they want to have because there's a kid in camp. That's a pretty big ask
That's an
for
imposition.
somebody.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
potentially. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a slightly different thought, and I don't know how realistic this is, but if camps, what was your original question? Like, how could camps make things more inviting, or you know,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, thinking kind of about this on both sides, whether it is, because I definitely want to know about how might camps that haven't included kids before think about bringing in including kids. But I think there's also a really interesting component of this for uh, kids and families, kids of all ages and families are out on the playa looking for an experience at Burning Man. And so some some activities and some interactivity are not necessarily going to lend themselves to including young people. Um, but there are likely a lot of spaces and a lot of interactivity that could easily incorporate and be welcoming to families and kids, even from maybe they are already, but they haven't explicitly thought about that in terms of radical inclusion. Or there might be a slight tweak. Like I noticed that we were having some conversation in the chat about including more non-alcoholic options at places that are serving beverages and having that be a really inclusive way of allowing the participation of families and young people.
I mean, yeah, I mean, basically, what I was thinking is giving a little bit of thought to being prepared. I mean, the first thing that popped into my mind was like, encourage people with kids to join you, right? Like it seems like when camps, I don't know if I've heard of a bad experience with this, but certainly when camps start having kids, like it's great to have kids around in a lot of ways, right? And so my sense is that there's a lot of support for that once it starts happening. But at the same time, I completely agree with Marilee. It's not something you want to impose on anybody, right? Like it has to be um, something that is explicitly worked out.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like in the guide, or in on the apps, when you submit an activity and it can be listed either in the guide or in the apps, there is the opportunity, you're prompted to say what this is. Is this an explicit adult experience? Is this an experience that's um, appropriate for kids? So I think people are being prompted to think about
Mm-hmm.
if their activities are kid friendly. But I think a lot of what Julia has said has really resonated with me, is that children are just small people. Like they're people, and they are approaching at Burning Man. Everybody's sort of on a level playing field in terms of exploration and wonder, and so I think um if you have activities, be open to the idea that children might be participants in those,
Yeah.
or that a family might come. You may not have designed that activity with families in mind, but one of the family members may have chosen your activity, and that means that the family will potentially come along with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant by like, it's great when kids are around and participating, right? I think very often because kids they reinforce that sense of play and wonder and,
Yeah, but I don't think you need to particularly like design something for kids. One thing that I'm really aware of is not like diminishing something because a child is going to be included, but just expecting that the kids are going to participate at the level that they're going to participate at. There's plenty of like inebriated people out there who are not even as capable as children as participating in something. So if you can think about it that way.
Julia?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that having kids adds to your experience. It doesn't detract from it. Kids are cool and eager and excited to participate. And also, kids aren't like self-conscious in the same way that sometimes adults are. I think it's a lot easier to break the ice with a kid or when there's a kid there, as long as it's something that's like relatively age appropriate, right? But I think it just takes a few small changes, right, that embody radical inclusion, like we've said, like providing non-alcoholic options in addition to alcoholic options. But it's not like there have to be activities that are just for kids. Um, I think that I've had arguably a better experience being a kid because I feel like, and I've heard other kid burners say this too, I felt like a VIP, right? Because, like I said, I got cuts in every line for anything. Um, I was invited on tons of like art cars, and I know my sister too has experienced like got to have cool backstage experiences that, if you're an adult, you're just one of the masses, but if you're a kid, you're cool, you're different a little bit, you're special, and almost everybody in my experience sees it that way, and I loved feeling like a star. That's how I like look back at my childhood at Burning Man. Yeah, VIP status a little bit.
Yeah. And ultimately, like thinking about how, like a lot of people, I think, who tend to come to our campfire talks or like plug into this kind of content are theme camp organizers, and we're really thinking about what might our interactivity be. And perhaps maybe the key to this is thinking about everyone at Burning Man is a kid in some way. We're either an actual kid of age, or with our interactivity, we're trying to tap into the child inside of all of us as adults to allow them to come out and play for a week or more.
When did Canada start working at the post office? I mean, they were pretty young,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah, we
So I mean, that's an example of like, I mean, that's a pretty adult, or like the job of people at the post office is to hassle people in a sense, right? I mean,
yeah,
Marilee, maybe you could speak. I mean, and the kids totally. I mean,
the kids are
it was
great at it.
the kids are really great at it. So there's some sort of like counterintuitive things there potentially too, right? Like a lot of this sort of role playing stuff, right? Like kids it works really well.
Mhm.
Yeah, we always have typically camped in the 3 o'clock sector and pretty close, like walking distance to the 3 o'clock post office. So our kid would just walk over there, open a window, and get to work. Like we had a friend who worked there and kind of showed them the ropes, which is relatively simple. And so yeah, I'm gonna go work at the post office for an hour. Okay, bye, see you later. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, or
amazing.
things like, I mean, like if you have an activity with coloring books, it's not necessarily kids who are going to want to come color. It's adults who want to just have an opportunity to like just zone out and color for a while. You will have some kids who will come color, but you're probably going to have just as many adults come to your kind of, kid-oriented activity.
Totally. I know there have been a couple of questions in the chat that would be relevant for us. Epiphany, I saw something about photography in there. What was our question?
So I think it might be a good idea actually if we can just have the Fletchers unmute and
Yeah.
discuss. So the question is, while they're getting started, what are your thoughts on photographers asking or not asking to photograph children on the playa?
Yeah, number one, thank you. Hi, I'm Matt or Lobster Man, and we've been bringing we have a 6-year-old daughter who's about to come say hi for 2 seconds. Say hi. Okay. All right. You gotta be quiet just for a sec. We've done, we have a very inclusive camp, which is awesome, and we love it. And there are children, mostly her, and we've had people come up and ask, "Hey, can I photograph you? Can I photograph your daughter?" And there's an uncomfortability there. The fact that, and I'm going to say it happened twice last year, and it ended up being very positive in the end because the people that did the photographs took down my information and sent me the photographs later, which was, it ended up being phenomenal. And now they're pictures that are sitting on my desk, but there's a protectiveness that at least my wife and I have. So it's like this fine line. And if I ever were to see somebody take a picture, it's that fine line of, okay, this is a fun, inclusive space, but where are those lines? Like right now, you all see her. This is part of it. But anyway, I will leave it there. But
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that this is one of those no firm rules areas, that what's going to be right for one family. I'm always like, when our kid was younger, I would say, yeah, go ahead and take a photo, unless I just got like a weird vibe. I think I pretty much always said, go ahead and take a photo. But I think this is one of those things. It's like, when do you let your kids use cell phones, or how much screen time do you let them have? It's going to be a family by family decision. I will say that, like you, I have had amazing experiences. Caritas has been in several books about Burning Man, where the people have tracked us down and gotten the permission, and those are amazing photos. And to have your kid in a book, and it's not like a Kids at Burning Man book, it's just a book about Burning Man. Because kids are, population wise, there are fewer children, I think that they really stand out to photographers. So you are going to be asked that, but I would just feel right in whatever decision you want to make for yourself and your family. And then as they get older, they can make that decision for themselves, or you can have a conversation in the car on the way to Burning Man. How do you feel about having your photo taken? Do you have any reservations about showing up online? And just kind of that's a great discussion to have, like when you're in line, or when you're like, making the drive out, is kind of like setting expectations around what types of experiences, you want to have, and what kind of boundaries you want to set, and what kind of boundaries does your kid want to set.
yeah, again, I'll go back on mute very quickly, but 100%, we include her in those conversations. Again, 6, 5, 4, 3 in terms of this. So it's like, where is it the parent's decision? But we try very hard to include her in, hey, what do you feel comfortable with? And she says no. Guess what? We're right behind her. So anyway,
I can't even take pictures of my kid anymore. So
love it.
And Marilee, isn't that like aren't those all the questions that we all should also be thinking about on our way to Burning Man of like, what am I going to be comfortable with? Am I comfortable with people taking my picture or possibly ending up online? Like, what kind of experience am I wanting to have at Burning Man? Um, like the thing that you said about having a dialogue with the people who are going to be in your camp, like that's not true only for camps that might be thinking about including a young person. That's true of having conversations with campmates about substances or people who might be in recovery or who might have issues around particular types of food or allergies or like other things with their like physicality that they need or medical conditions that they need to account for. Like these are conversations and dialogues that all of us should be having, not just because there's a young person involved. Julia, did you have thoughts about photography and having your picture taken, either from when you were young or from now?
It's never been a huge uh issue for me, and it's honestly not something that I remember being a huge part of my experience in a positive or negative way. It happened a few times and I was always fine with it. Same thing. We have some really nice pictures that people have sent us after the fact, which I think is a great form of gifting. But yeah, if your kid doesn't want to do it, don't make them do it. And I think if you're the kind of parent that's bringing your kid to Burning Man, you're not the kind of parent who's going to be forcing them into places that are uncomfortable for them. So yeah, I really just second all of what's been said.
Yeah. Awesome. Epiphany, what other, I said there was a question, another question for Julia in there somewhere.
Yeah, I have a couple. The next question is from Agenda for Julia. How was the decision to come every other year made?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm from Albuquerque, so that's a fairly far drive. Um, 2 very full days of driving, so that's just a lot. That for one thing. Two, obviously going to Burning Man's expensive, so it was partly financial, and then also, you only have a certain amount of vacation time, and my parents are like me, adventurous, and so we traveled elsewhere too. We have family that lives in Europe, and so not all of our resources being my parents' vacation days from work and their savings, not all of that went to Burning Man, and it was just a life balance that they struck, and every other year worked really well for us. Every year would have been, I think, too much, too big of a journey, and too expensive. But I was, as a kid, I do remember being jealous of the people who were a bit more local. I was really good friends with 2 kids from Reno who camped in our village, and they got to go every other year, or sorry, every year. Um, and I think that would be really nice in its own right. But I was also grateful for the fact that I got, a diversity of experiences, and I didn't, in retrospect, I don't feel like I was missing out once you get over the like FOMO, which I know everyone has. It's not unique to being a kid, but yeah.
Yeah. I have FOMO about things and I go every year because I don't see everything. Yeah. Epiphany, what other questions do we have on the list?
Our next question is from PETA for Julia. Did your experience in Black Rock City change as you became a teenager?
Yes, very much so. So yeah, the first year that I remember going, I was 8, and I was I was with my dad every like 24/7 the entire time. Um, and that was great. And then I guess every other year, as I was 2 years older, um, I had a little bit more freedom each year. I remember the first time he left me at camp by myself to go get ice because I didn't feel like coming, and it was okay for me to just stay in our village by myself. And I remember the first time, like the friends that I had from Reno, I remember the first time that I was allowed to go out with them because they were a little bit older than me and things like that. And then when I went when I was a senior in high school, that's the most recent time that I've been because um, now being in college, it's a lot more difficult to take a week out of college than it is to take a week out of high school. And our schedule just doesn't work. But I'm planning on coming back. I'm not done with it. I just taking a few year break. When I was a senior in high school, I basically had free reign over the place. I checked in with my dad, like the same way that you'd check in with a campmate, more or less. And that's also because, like I said, he trusted my judgment and I trusted my judgment, and I was capable of knowing what I was, where I was supposed to be and where I wasn't, what I should eat or drink and what I shouldn't. And I could make myself food. And so as you become, it's the same thing in the real world, right? Like, you like as a kid, I remember when I was allowed to walk to my best friend's house across the big busy street and right stuff like that. There's milestones. The exact same thing at Burning.
And by that time, you also had a really good sense for what to expect from the environment
Yes.
and from the location, both the physical and the natural environment. Yeah. Marilee, Keith, anything to add about how things changed for either the two of you interacting with Caritas or for Caritas as they got older?
I would say kind of exactly the same as what Julia is describing. So last year they were 17, all of their friends were 18. And I think maybe we were kind of like the prior year we said you need to be back by midnight because things but last year it was just whatever, go. And honestly, what they really wanted to do was to go to midnight poutine and go like hit all the food camps that are
Hmm.
that
It
are
was just a
open.
roving pack of very hungry teenagers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And there were a number of them, like 5 of them all on bikes and, just having a good time. And when they got cold and hungry enough, they would come home. But yeah, so kind of progressively. And Julia, I love how you have the analogy of like walking to your friend's house by yourself. I think it's exactly that same thing where we would when Caritas was younger, we would identify camps that we knew were welcoming to kids, where either we had friends that they could go visit on their own, or where the camp itself was kind of known to be. Because, if you camp in the same neighborhood, you get to know camps from year to year, and, know that that's an okay place for your kid to just show up. Like in the 3 o'clock sector, the Aqua Zone was always kind of like a good spot for kids to go to, or Haka-Cola, or um, you know, anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think something that's worth calling out, I know that we have spent all of our session today, maybe without mentioning it really explicitly, we've been talking to two sets of experiences, or talking about two sets of experiences that are not camping with Kidsville. And I think often people who might be thinking about bringing their kids to Burning Man may think, I can only camp with Kidsville because I have a kid coming with me. And that's not true at all. But for a lot of people, camping with Kidsville makes a lot of sense, because every camp has some kid in it, and it's almost a built-in neighborhood of friends who are the same age. So, I mean, I think echoing again here as we start to wrap up what Marilee had said earlier about um, the ability to kind of choose whatever is going to be right for you. For some people, it might be bringing their kids. For some people, it might be not bringing their kids. For some people, it might be camping with Kidsville and having that built-in structure of a village that's built around young people and kids. And for others, it might be seamlessly incorporating kids into your otherwise adult camp. And bringing them in, like you don't have to camp with Kidsville. It is definitely possible to bring your kids and not camp with Kidsville And Kidsville can be a really amazing experience for the adults and the young people who camp with them. Epiphany, I think we may have one more question.
Yes, there was some discussion during the event in the chat about bringing kids to Build Week. So in general, do you all have any insight or tips?
I have nothing to offer here. The earliest I think we've ever showed up has been Friday. So we haven't been involved in any
Maybe
big bills.
Thursday, yeah, but yeah.
Thursday
I mean,
or
that's
Friday of like pre-event open.
yes.
Yeah.
So that's just a tiny bit of Build Week, Let's
I can add a tiny bit more color as we, volunteered the question. Yes, some of the feedback was great. That include them in the process, and that makes a ton of sense. We've had a 3, 4, 5, and now 6-year-old, so the level of involvement, she's not going to be hoisting steel, but we've got a big fishing net up top that has stuffies in it. So, daughter, you get to throw stuffies up into the net. That's great. So, mostly it was, we've made it work. But a lot of it is also, okay, the two of us come in with our daughter, and one of us at any given time is pulled. And it's like, hey, we're not value add to the Build Week. Yeah, hold on. That sounds, we're not value adding to the build, but we're value add to the Build Week in terms of being able to be a cohesive family out there, which is really important. So anyway, I was hoping for other thoughts and insight, and it's going to evolve over time because, as a place theme camp, we're very fortunate. We want to build it, and the level of involvement is going to increase over time. So
yeah,
anyway.
and I was that parent for a long time so with the 4 of us, I was the adult who watched the kids. So, that was kind of for a long time, that was my sort of designated role, is there were 3 pairs of hands that were free because I was corralling the kids in some way, shape, or form. And that is a valid contribution to a project.
that is
Being,
I mean, that's
because it's
more than
making,
valid.
yeah, because it's making it possible for you as a
100%.
family, and you're investing in the future, because now we have a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds who are fully
Who do all the
vested in
work.
Burning Man, who do all the work, bring the energy, bring the ideas. So you're really developing that future of Burning Man, I think. And also modeling for others that it can be done. So I don't think it's a drain at all. Theme camps right now are really challenged, I think, for skilled work and contributions. So I see a lot. I'm on the theme camp organizers list, and I just see a lot of people who are talking about their numbers decreasing. And so I think if you're a steady contributing family to that theme camp, you're bringing the value, you're bringing the experience, how everything works. You can help contribute to things going smoothly, and if you have to corral the kid for a couple of hours, it's fine.
Yeah, and I want to put one point of clarification. I was not trying to say it's a drain by any stretch.
Oh no. I didn't take it that way. I
Okay,
was
good.
just like, that is a role that you are playing as part of a team. If your
Yeah.
team includes kids, somebody's got to be watching the kids.
Yeah,
And
100%.
yeah, and either that's somebody that you've procured a ticket for, who's kind of like serving as a nanny, or it's a family member. Yeah.
And there are other ways to involve people beyond I can carry heavy things. Like for example, in our camp, we are also really aware of during Build Week, people need to eat. People need to make sure that they're still hydrated. There needs to be shade. Sometimes people need reminders that they need to eat and rest and stay hydrated. And some of those roles might be able to incorporate someone who's not an adult and maybe doesn't have the ability to wield a jackhammer or something like that. Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to have had this conversation with all of you and our participants, our audience, our attendees today. Many thanks to Marilee and Keith and Julia for being here to share your experiences with us. For our attendees who are here, please take a few moments to fill out our feedback form. It helps us to develop interesting topics and content for our future talks. And again, if you would like to participate in that, either in production or participation, we have a form for that too. It's Burning Man. We like our forms. Check those out in the chat. And there will be 2 more Campfire Talks this season, June 3rd and June 24th. Keep an eye out for registration for those coming soon. We'll be discussing OSS, and we'll also have a chance for us to meet our future Playa neighbors and make some connections before we actually get there. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. We will see you in the dust. And as we play out, I'm going to leave the last word with our documentary team. Thank you all for being here tonight.
Experience I could ever imagine.
As the event has matured and grown up, there are these generations moving through, and I love to see older and elderly people here. I love to see kids here. I think the inclusion of all ages just makes the entire experience more authentic and more translatable to the rest of life, which is ultimately what's going to make it sustainable and to allow it to have ongoing impact.
You'll be really, really amazed if you let these kids off the leash a little bit. They're whole people. Even when they're little tiny people, they're whole people already. And this is a great place to let them be who they are and let them find out who they are.
I'm Phil and I'm a burner.